All right, welcome back to another great episode of Dr. J Radio Live. Of course, this is Dr. J broadcasting from the City of Angels, or City of Demons, City of Dead, La La Land, Hollyweird, whatever the hell you want to call it, folks. I'm always open for your suggestions. Now, being October, and since we are coming close to Halloween, as you noticed for the last week plus, we've been focusing on having people involved in ghost hunts. A lot of people from television shows like the Ghost Nation, which were the original people from Ghost Hunters. We just had on Jeff Bellinger yesterday from another one, which I believe he was on Ghost. Yeah, he was on Ghost Adventures as well, not Ghost Hunters. Today we bring you yet another paranormal investigator, the one and only Brian J. Cano. Brian, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me. How's it going?
Oh, it's a pleasure. It's a super pleasure now that I got you on. Now, let me ask you this. How did you get started in investigating the paranormal?
Oh man, this is always the first question, and it really forces me to look back. And as the years go on, I'm looking back farther and farther. Um, I feel like I've always been interested in the topic. I mean, what kid isn't fascinated by the mysteries of our world? But I officially got into, I guess, the paranormal field in 2002. And this was via a cable access show here in Staten Island, New York, that we called Scared on Staten Island. And to say that it was a paranormal investigation show is almost giving it too much credit. It was more steeped in urban exploration. And the gist of it was we figured, okay, here on Staten Island, there's many abandoned places. And anytime you have an abandoned place, for any amount of time, sometimes nature comes in to reclaim it. It falls into disrepair. The rumors start. There's ghosts. There's reports of satanic activity. There's other sorts of weird goings-ons in these places. And we figured, okay, well, we've grown up listening to these tales. Let's see if we can't get to the bottom of any of them. So maybe if they are as haunted as everyone says they are, we can go in just with ourselves, our five senses, and a few cameras and document it. So that's what we did. That was my, I guess, toe in the water to this whole paranormal explosion that we have today.
Now, let me ask you this. The two fundamental questions I always ask anybody who's involved in ghost hunting or paranormal investigators. One, have you ever come across a ghost of an extraterrestrial?
Have I ever come across a ghost of an extraterrestrial? That's a good question. And congrats, no one's ever asked me that before. Personally, I feel there must be a unifying theory to the paranormal. Now, you have people who are into ghosts and spirits. You have those who are into cryptozoology. You have those who are into ufology. And surprisingly, the camps don't mix too much. But I feel like, okay, if we're speaking to something intangible, it's ridiculous to assume that they must be spirits of humans who have passed on, or rather that it just must be humans who passed on. And in the field, we consider things like angels, demons, Djinn, fairies, yes, extraterrestrials, yes, certain kinds of cryptids, and just like any other discipline in science, there is an overlapping. So I feel there must be one in the paranormal too. So I can't say I've ever spoken to an extraterrestrial, but if I did, I probably maybe have mislabeled it.
The other fundamental question I always ask people who are involved in ghost hunts, and I'm glad you mentioned the fact about paranormal, because it does encompass everything: ghosts, uh, poltergeists, definitely extraterrestrials, UFOs. It's all under the same umbrella of paranormal. And that's why I always like to speak about to anybody with regards to any of the specialties. I don't focus on just ghosts or just ETs or I like to do it all because I do believe there is a cross. The second fundamental question I always ask is, have you ever come across a ghost that is speaking a dead language?
A dead language. I've had spirits who have spoken in different living languages. We've had some cases where we do believe that we've gotten some Latin, we've gotten some other languages that we couldn't necessarily identify, that um, we just didn't have the resources to see, okay, well, what portion of the world could this be coming from? What language could this be? Does it have any verbal cues to something that it may have evolved into? But Latin is very big.
I was just going to say it is definitely big
Yeah,
because that's not something that people on this planet are really speaking. I do know that the generation before me, my parents in their 70s, when they were in school in Greece, they were not only taught Greek and English, but also they were taught Latin. It was just, you had to learn Latin. It was, I guess, for etymology, to break down the words. If you know Greek, if you know Latin, when you're learning the Western languages such as English, Spanish, Italian, German, French, they all are comprised of Greek and Latin. And in fact, where does Latin come from is ancient Greek. So really, you could say it's all Greek to me. Now, I'm assuming that you've been to some of the most haunted places, such as maybe the Queen Mary.
I've been there, yes.
What did you, any stories you could tell us from there?
I've only been on the Queen Mary briefly. Literally, we were shooting an episode of Haunted Collector in the area. We had a couple of LA shoots, and on days off or days in between, if we had a substantial amount of time, I always liked to take little field trips. So wherever we were, I would look up the local haunts and try to visit them. And being in LA, all right, John and I had to go take a trip down to the Queen Mary, and we were only there for maybe an hour or two, and I had never been there before. So it was, for me, I needed to put my foot on base. And the moment I stepped on it, even though the ship is docked and moored and it's not going anywhere, it can't set sail, I felt this distortion. Like the minute I stepped onto the deck, I just felt, ugh. That's probably that's the best way I could describe it. It wasn't a nausea. It wasn't a dizziness. It wasn't anything of that. It was just a feeling of, ooh, all right, something's wrong. And that's not to say that the Queen Mary is haunted by demons. It's just saying that, okay, yeah, I was sensitive to the energy that was on that boat.
The other place, now, I've been to the Queen Mary a couple times. I personally have not seen anything, but when I spoke to the people that work there, most have a story, especially those who have been to the pool room. Apparently, the pool room on the Queen Mary has more incidents than throughout the Queen Mary other areas. But definitely people who work there regularly generally do have a story. The other place that I've always heard, but I've never been to myself, is the Stanley Hotel. Have you been there?
I've been there too. Yes, I went there just as a patron, a guest. I wasn't there specifically for any paranormal reason. And when I arrived, I was more thrilled about Stephen King's The Shining than actually anything spiritual.
That's right. It was filmed there.
But, I feel like when it comes to a place that becomes famous, like the previous two locations mentioned, I feel that there's a bias to report the things that have come before. So for me to go on to the Queen Mary and to not have an experience in said pool room, people go, oh, well, I guess nothing happened for you. It's like, well, okay, something could happen to me on the deck, in the parking lots, in the stern, and then aft, in the engine room, anywhere. And I feel like there's such a desire to match, especially because it's something that we can't prove definitively, that in general people want to, if they're going to report said activity, there's always the fear of, they're not going to believe me, or they're going to think I'm crazy. Oh, but yeah, I had an experience in there too. Hey, we're all alike. We're all the same. And that's not to discount the reports of activity in said places, but I feel like, I'm not, more and more, I'm not a believer in fixed hauntings. That is, okay, in room 1419, that's where the spirit stays. Although there can be reasons for that. Spirit, especially the intelligent kind, have free will, so they can go where they wish. They can visit you in your room. They can decide to present themselves or hide from you at any point.
Now, talk about some places that you've been to that were not known to be haunted, but yet you found to be haunted.
This show isn't long enough for that.
Just a couple.
Again, it's like saying, okay, I can list 5 famous places off the top of my head, but of all the cases I've done, most of them are not quite as famous and haven't been on the shows or haven't been on the documentaries and are not at the top of anyone's list. But for me, I guess the one that I always come back to is a place called the Grand Midway Hotel in Windber, Pennsylvania. This was a spot that, for me, the case was so intense that it changed me and my team. And I've had so many experiences there afterward that had nothing to do with the paranormal, but were both amazing, both creatively. For example, a buddy of mine and I, actually the one who I collaborated with on Scared on Staten Island, we wanted to challenge ourselves and write. We were having a bit of writer's block, so we said, you know what? Let's lock ourselves away somewhere for a week and just focus on this script. And we had talked to the owner of the hotel. He was a friend of ours. And we said, hey, Blair, what if we just come and stay here for a week? We're going to write a script. The goal is that we don't want to be bothered. We want to be sequestered, almost like being in prison. And you can be our warden to make sure that we stay on track. And something in his eyes just glistened and lit up and said, oh, and he has a very particular laugh. He went, yeah, I can do that for you guys. And so we did. We spent a week in that place literally being prisoners. We had jumpsuits. We were chained to the bed. The chains were only as long as could reach to the bathroom across the hallway. And it was our task to write a full screenplay to pitch somewhere after we were done. And we went through an entire week of crazy characters dropping by, yard time. We had time with an actual prison psych. We had movie hour every night. We really had an experience, and this was not a cushy bed and breakfasty type hotel. This place was raw. It was cold. We had that there, and this was a location that we had investigated years before and had a case with potential demonic implications. That here we are back again doing something positive. And in recent years, I believe it was 2016, we got into the Guinness Book of World Records for having the world's largest Ouija board painted on the roof.
Wow.
Yeah.
Now, a lot of people, when they think of the Ouija board, instantly think demonic activity. But yes, I've spoken to quite a few people who have gone into a house for either an episode of Ghost Hunters, Ghost Adventures, whatever it be, or just any paranormal investigator that had, say, somebody who was affected through demonic activity. And the answer they gave is that every house that did have demonic activity had a Ouija board, but not every house that had a Ouija board had demonic activity.
This is the old adage that every rectangle is a square, but not every square is a rectangle. Yes, the Ouija board is just another tool, not unlike many of the ones that we use. The difference being, this is one of the few tools that says, okay, you can use my body to make this operate. Anything that we do in the paranormal realm, any contact we try to make, yes, we're taking a risk because we don't know exactly who we're talking to. We don't know for sure who it is we're contacting. And the Ouija board has gotten a lot of bad press because of movies and things of that sort. Inherently, there is nothing wrong with the Ouija board. It's a piece of cardboard with some writing on it. You can make it on a sheet of loose leaf if you wanted to. The difference is you're invoking spirit to enter your body to make the planchette or whatever indicator work. So that's the first danger right there. And just second of all, and this applies to any contact, you don't know who you're contacting. So
that's right. Ghosts
I guess,
do lie. I've noticed that.
Yeah, oh, absolutely. And not to mention, I this is a huge assumption on my part. One would think that, okay, if there are many reports of demonic activity being associated with Ouija boards, maybe the demons just know, hey, people who use a Ouija board generally don't know what they're doing. This is the way we can have access to the humans. It's like driving in a bad neighborhood. You roll up your windows, you lock the door, but hey, this is where the bad element is, and they're looking to take your car. If you drive through it, they're gonna carjack you, and whose fault is that?
That's true. It may not be your fault at all. It's just bad luck sometimes.
Yeah.
Now, you mentioned Ouija board. What other tools do you use when you go on a hunt?
These days, well, back on Haunted Collector, I was I was the tech guy, so everything was just 2 large Pelican suitcases filled with gadgets and gear, battery-operated things that lit up and made a lot of noise. These days, I'm very simplified. I'm like Batman. I have my utility belt, and whatever can fit on it is what I carry. So that would be my Mel meter, which is my EMF detector / Swiss Army knife of paranormal tools, because there's a lot of different things built onto it. I've got my digital audio recorder, so I can do EVP sessions. And lately, within the past year or 2 or so, I've been bringing along a pendulum, which is an old school tool. And I've been having some interesting results with it, in the respect that it doesn't help me divine anything that's going on at the location or the haunting that's happening there at the time. I usually end up using it and delivering messages for people who are there with me that have nothing to do with the location. It's just like, oh, you're here, and oh, the phone's off the hook. Okay, here's what needs to be said. And at first I was unsure about it. I was questioning myself. And recently I just say, okay, you know what? If it's a message, just, all right, cool, I'll deliver it. It has nothing to do with me, but if that is now my role, then I'm happy to facilitate.
Of the 4 things you mentioned, the Ouija board, your EMF reader, the digital audio recorder, and the pendulum, I myself use a pendulum fairly often, as well as a Ouija board. And fortunately for me, I've never had anything bad happen. I've never seen someone be possessed or anything like that. And it wasn't until I had a priest on who does exorcisms, Father Jack Ashcraft, who told me that there are 3 types of demonic activity, possession being the worst. The first 2 are oppression and obsession. Have you come across a lot of cases that had some form of demonic activity?
I feel like, well, those indications are definitely correct. I've been aware of cases that contain those elements. It can be difficult to diagnose because, especially in this culture of things on TV, everything's a demon, people jump to that conclusion, and there's a lot of fear without fact. And it's very easy to fall into that trap of, oh my God, something's happening. Oh, the person got scratched, or something got knocked over. It's aggressive. Oh, it must be demonic. I typically have found that true demonic activity happens over a long period of time and doesn't often display the intensity of activity that one would expect from a demon. Like it's often nothing like you see in the movies. So to differentiate it from a human spirit can be difficult, because, I mean, with human spirit, you get aggressive, nasty ones too. Hey, if you were a jerk in life, it's possible that you are also a jerk in death. So we have a lot of spirits that do masquerade as demons, and demons who masquerade as innocents, children, or people that are there to get your sympathy so that you let your guard down. Um, but yeah, even investigators that I know, sometimes you get too deep into a case, and I've seen, comrades of mine become obsessed, and it takes them years to kind of crawl out of it, to get back into the light. And some I see do that, and others kind of drop off and disappear, and all I could do is just hope that they're getting the help they need.
Now, your first show, Haunted Collector, and then you have a current one, Paranormal Caught on Camera. How many members of your team were there on Haunted Collector?
Haunted Collector focused around the Zathis family and kind of the immediate team. So that was John, his two kids, Chris and Amy. Season 1, the other investigators were myself and Beth Ezzo. In seasons 2 and 3, Beth had left the show to get married and start a family. So to replace her, we got Jason and Jesslyn, who rounded out the team pretty nicely.
And how many seasons did the show run for?
Haunted Collector ran for 3 seasons, and it was blessed with heavy repeat play and the rotation, both on Sci-Fi and then in later years on Destination America. I want to say for 2 or 3 years, it was a staple on Tuesday night programming for Destination America. I felt like, hey, we are the residual haunts of the airwaves, because it's not new, but people keep watching it, they keep enjoying it. So I was glad to see that.
I know Destination America and Travel Channel have definitely upped the game as far as putting money into shows like these, shows up about ghosts and shows about ETs, UFOs, because in the past, say 10 years ago, that's not what people tuned into those channels for. Now they are bringing the bigger budgets and focusing on these topics, which are very high in demand.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, since Ghost Hunters landed on the airwaves in 2004, there's been a general increase, and like the tide, it ebbs and it goes out and it comes back in. Where Sci-Fi used to have all the shows, Ghost Hunters International, et cetera, and then it was Destination America wanted to be the home of paranormal programming. Now it's Travel, and I feel like there's several other networks that come along that have their programming too, but there always seems to be one bastion of programming that says, oh, we're going to just, I know we're called this, but we're going to really focus on the paranormal, because that's what people tend to be interested in. And you've got your reality shows, and you've got your cooking shows and your court shows, but you've got your paranormal shows too, and they're definitely not going away anytime soon.
Now, when did Paranormal Caught on Camera start?
Paranormal Caught on Camera started actually this year in 2019. If I recall correctly, I think it premiered in March. There was they did a sneak preview on New Year's Eve in 2018, and I'm thinking, like, right, New Year's Eve, who's watching Paranormal Caught on Camera? But people were watching, and when it had its proper premiere this year, we've just gotten such a positive response. It was originally a 10-episode run. When the first 2 or 3 episodes aired, Travel immediately ordered another 6 on the back end, so that upped our season to 16 episodes. We've been renewed for season 2, 26 episodes. This is a proper season length, like back in the days of before the cable networks came on. It's like you would watch a show for half the year,
That's right.
And then you would watch repeats, and it was great. No, this 8 or 10 episode arc that we're having now. All right, like say Game of Thrones, you had 10 episodes, and then you had 42 weeks with
nothing
show.
Yeah.
So when it comes back, you're like, oh, that's right, that show. What happened? I forget. So this is nice. We're gonna get a proper season.
And you actually answered a question that I was just going to ask already, which was, are you going to have a second season? Which clearly you are, and a proper season, as you mentioned. And, and I'm glad you brought that up, the fact that a proper season should have 26 episodes, and then the rest of the year is repeats. That's what we expected because in the 80s, even in the 90s, that's what television shows were. They were 26 episodes, half the year. Miami Vice, I'm talking about shows like that. That's what they were. They gave them 26 episodes, and then the rest of the year you saw repeats until they were shooting the next season.
Right. Yeah, that was a great time for TV because it really allowed you to immerse yourself in the story, the programming, and right, if you missed something, you could catch it again. But here we are. We're in the age of on-demand and streaming and binge watching. So I know personally, I'll binge watch a show on Netflix or Hulu, watch all the episodes in a weekend, love it, and then forget it by Monday. I'm like, what happened? How did that end? And it doesn't retain. And I feel like the way that we digest content these days, it's really short-term memory based. And I don't know if there'll be a reversal of that.
Well, we could only hope, right? That's the best we can do is hope. Now, in the past season that you just did of Paranormal Caught on Camera, can you talk about some of the episodes that stick out the most to you?
With Paranormal Caught on Camera, the premise of the show is that the paranormal is such an interesting topic to people that all over the world, for years, people have been catching things that they can't explain on camera. And today it's even easier now that everyone walks around with a camera in their pockets as part of their phones. So we've been getting a lot of submissions that are on phones and in security cams, home security cams. And the producers collect and sift through all the videos. They decide which ones are going to be featured. Then the panel of, I don't want to say experts, but the paranormal panel then gets to view them and comment on what they think it is, how this relates to the paranormal, what could be going on, and what maybe the observer could do about it. So for any episode, I'm given a list, and I go and I film them 2 at a time. So I have a list of X amount of videos, and each one I watch, I'll watch it once, and then I'll watch it again to really formulate an opinion. And then I go in and I just, for 2-3 hours, I sit in a chair against the green screen, and they say, okay, all right, here's the next video, let's talk about it. And we do. And some of the videos that have really gotten reactions from the public are either ones that are so crazy that it has most of us stumped. Like, oh my God, what was that? Like, what could it be? I've got nothing. Or the ones that seem ridiculously too good to be true, that, oh, that was photoshopped, or that's fake, or oh, come on, guys. And what I love about this show is that, as opposed to Haunted Collector, well, A, I'm not in night vision, and B, I don't have to crawl under any houses for this. Even if there's a video that I see that I watch that I'm really not behind, that I don't feel is genuine or on the level, I can still comment about the phenomena. I can still comment about the topic and bring to the viewer a greater understanding of, well, this is maybe what the person filming the video thought they had, and here's why, and here's a little bit more about it. And additionally, if you're into ghosts and spirits, all right, you'll see some UFO videos too. If you're into UFOs, you'll see some crypto videos too. And it gets everybody a little more acclimated to all the different sides of the paranormal. For instance, and I don't even know what category to put this in, there was one video where there was this baby. His name was Connor. He's crying in his crib. Then he climbs up onto the side, stands, perfect balance, and he's making these horrible noises, and he like throws his arms up in either defiance or victory, and just then, as if somebody snapped their fingers, his body went limp and he fell back into the crib. Again, this horrible noise, this horrible cry, this and some people are like, well, was it demonic? Is the baby just a good, acrobatic? What's going on here? And it sticks out to me because I'm looking for strings. I'm looking for something. And all I could think of is that, okay, I don't know what parents in a quest for fame would want to put its child through that kind of craziness just to get famous. So, all right, it must be something, but what is it?
There are two questions here in the chat already. The first one we just touched on, and but in fairness, I'm going to ask it anyway. And we also I mentioned this to you early on. Okay, here goes. This is from Ward Alien Video, and the question reads: does he believe UFOs and other supernatural things are related?
I believe that there is probably a unifying theory to most paranormal activity. I mean, let's blur the lines for seconds. Why is Bigfoot never really seen or captured? Why do we not have evidence of life as far as young or elimination or anything other than just some random footprints in the forest? Well, perhaps maybe that which we call Bigfoot is a multi-dimensional creature. Maybe it can pass through dimensions. Maybe it's an alien. Maybe all the things that we're looking at, like, okay, UFOs, could those be beings from far off in space, or could they just be from a neighboring dimension, literally on top or below ours? Maybe just a micron of a measurement off in phase and in frequency and vibration. I really think that sometimes things can be mislabeled, and oftentimes when I look into the sky or I see some of these videos, especially of UFOs, UFO stands for unidentified flying object. So just because the casual viewer can't identify it doesn't mean it's unidentifiable, and it certainly doesn't mean it's an extraterrestrial. So I look up in the sky and I see things every day that, I don't know what that is, but I bet it's not an alien, although I do believe in life outside of this earth.
Especially now, right? I mean, when I was going to school, and I'm assuming when you were going to school in elementary, we were told that there were no planets outside of our solar system. It was just stars, gases, and pulsars, and things like that. Now, astronomers are saying that for every star, there exists approximately 1.8 planets. Now, that number brings the number of planets to billions. I mean, just in the Milky Way, let alone all the other galaxies, and not even factoring, say, other dimensions of where, like you mentioned, where these ETs can be. So the times now, say, instead of, say, 1985, we far more people are accepting of what's out there and what's possible. And far more credible people are reporting anomalous activity, whether it be through unidentified craft, to a translucent being, to a poltergeist haunting a home, than they were in the past. And they're not as ridiculed as they were, which is great. Okay, two more questions are here now.
I was actually hoping you were going to go Carl Sagan there with billions and billions of stars. You gave me 1 billion, so all right.
No, I said billions,
right.
Plural, yeah.
Right.
Okay, 9 lives. What does he think about the spirits? Are they trapped souls?
Good question. 9 lives. Could spirits be trapped souls? I feel like. Okay, take a dog. All right, we call it a dog. It has a scientific name. There are many breeds. There's many varieties, but they all fall into the category of
Canine.
Dog.
Yeah, dog.
So just to boil it down to the most simplest, widely used term, dog. Okay. Well, I say I've got a dog. You go, oh, what kind? Same thing with spirit. Okay, you've got a spirit. Okay, well, what does that mean? Spirit, and there isn't a exact nomenclature or verbiage that is textbook, although it's widely agreed that the difference between a ghost and a spirit, a ghost is an echo or something that could be haunting a location that doesn't necessarily mean that it's intelligent. It could be a residual haunt, whereas a spirit is something interactive. A spirit is something that doesn't necessarily have to be human. Sometimes you can get non-human spirits, and why are they here? the reasons and causes vary. So, I mean, some, especially when you're talking about human spirit, yeah, some are here. And to say that they're trapped, it's not necessarily always trapped as far as the prison sense of the word, like, oh, I can't get out, I'm trapped. A lot of it is free will. You know, they're scared of judgment, they're scared to move on, or maybe they have unfinished business or something that is keeping them here, that if they so chose to just throw their hands up and say, you know what, I'm done with this plane, I'm done, gotta go, they could move on to that next plane of existence. But sometimes, you'll get spirit, perhaps, of someone in life maybe who was mentally ill or had some kind of psychotic problem that maybe they don't know they're dead, maybe they can't accept it. It doesn't even have to be a mental illness for people to just not accept it and be, I guess, trapped that way. But as far as what we understand at the moment, it's not quite as cut and dry as that. I mean, all right, just I think it was today or yesterday, I had read that an experiment was done that Chinese scientists finally were able to teleport a proton from a lab up to an orbiting satellite, an orbiting space station.
Wow.
Due to quantum entanglement. Now, of course, this is on a very small scale. This is
one molecule, right?
But it opens the door for maybe, who knows, it could open the door for Star Trek technology somewhere down the line. That being said, we have to consider what these physical and quantum physical implications mean for spirit. You know, how do they interact? I mean, just looking at our universe, it was assumed that, yes, space was empty and there was nothing there, but it's been discovered now that the majority of the universe is filled with dark matter and dark energy that is imperceptible to us. We're only witnessing its results. So that being said, all right, does spirit act on some kind of level there where it's like, okay, you know, we can't currently, well, we know we definitely can't currently measure it by any of our known systems. So that's why I always tell people, never stop searching and don't fall into the trap of, okay, I'm going to watch TV, I'm going to emulate it, and hey, that's all we need to do because they're doing it. No, we're still in the infancy. We are still on like day one, week one of our paranormal education, and I think it's going to take all of us to really progress.
There's two more questions in the chat for you. The first one, what about Skinwalker Ranch? Is it a hoax?
Oh man, Skinwalker Ranch. I've never been to Skinwalker Ranch, but that was one. There was a couple of videos for Paranormal Caught on Camera that came from Skinwalker Ranch, and the rumors and the legends and everything that I read and researched about that area. I mean, I've never been there, so I can't say it's a hoax, but some of the things I've read are fantastic. It makes you really think, oh, come on, how can this be possible? But think about just what we accept these days. You know, back in time, we used to believe that the Earth was the center of our solar system and everything revolved around us. Then someone said, oh, no, that's not true. It revolves around the sun. All of us said, oh, come on. And then we discovered it's true.
They were heretics, yeah. Some were beheaded for that if they believed that at the time. And, you know what, a little over 500 years ago, we thought the world was flat.
That was going to be my next example, and somehow some people are going back to that. So
I know, right? It boggles my mind.
You can get off the train here. The rest of us will progress. You can stay here with my blessing. More power to you. But yeah, I mean, this is why I call myself a scientist. I even though I have no doctorate or no professional training to say, hey, I'm Dr. Brian J. Cano, I tend to think science-minded in that I will put my chips down on something that I have information on. I could say to you, okay, the sky is blue. If tomorrow something happens and I get more information that contradicts that, and it's, oh, the sky is actually magenta, all right, I will go where the facts, where the information takes me. Whereas so many other people are wrapped up in belief, and it's hard to change a belief because that really that gets anchored to your core, and people are unwilling to change beliefs because it's so tied in with identity. And this is what we see in religion. This is what we see in politics. People will go down to the bitter end, not wanting to change sides because they feel like, all right, I've backed a horse, and now I can't, out of pride or stubbornness, I can't change it. And yet the true scientist is a dreamer. They will conceive of things that aren't yet and find a way to get to it. All the advances we have. I mean, just the fact that I'm sitting in my living room talking to you, you're an entire coast away, people are listening to us in their houses all over the world. This is amazing. We take it for granted, but someone had to dream this. Someone had to develop this and advance this, and here we are. And it's an amazing thing.
150 years ago, this was not even possible. You know, it was Nikola Tesla. I know Marconi gets the fame for basically introducing radio waves, but Nikola Tesla, up until him, there were no radio waves around the Earth that other than what occurred naturally. He was the first one to start experimenting with them, and of course, like I said, Marconi ended up getting all the credit for it, but only now are we recognizing what Nikola Tesla really did for us. Okay, here's another one for you. Does exorcism really work?
Ooh, does exorcism really work? It's tough. That's pretty much asking me to endorse a process that, again, is intangible and has its roots in faith. And even though I was raised Catholic, and I do have a lot of that still within me, I'm a non-practicing Catholic these days. It's tough. I mean, I hate saying it. It's like, all right, I'm not a religious person, but I've become spiritual in that I consider many different options, and I see religions pretty much just all being the same. You know, be a good person, don't kill anybody. You know, there's a greater power.
Yeah.
But as far as exorcisms, that's a good question. As we currently understand it, sure, they work. I've seen video of exorcisms, and again, the ones I've seen look nothing like they do in the movies. It was seemingly calm. You almost, at first glance, would be unimpressed, like, oh, this is it. But if you consider about the adversary that one is taking on in an exorcism, this is a being that predates man, that has been around, that has infinite patience, that has infinite intelligence, that can wrap us around their fingers at a whim. For us to combat that, the entire point of an exorcism is not, the priest is not the one doing battle. The priest is invoking, God, the Holy Spirit, the saints, everyone. He's pretty much calling everyone to bear to say, hey, we all have to fight this. And that's not an area of the paranormal that I really want to go into. I mean, anytime I get something that seems like it could be going down that road, I have people and colleagues that I refer those cases to. Because honestly, it scares me. Because
it scares the crap out of me too. And you actually are going into what I was going to follow up with, which is, have you ever gone into a case that you knew was evil, that spirit was going to harm you, but you just sort of mentioned that you do refer those to other people?
I mean, the one and only case that I ever got involved with that had potential demonic activity was at the Grand Midway Hotel. And it was just one of those things where, okay, we knew something was there. We knew where it was. And at the time, I was more of a skeptic than I am these days. So I guess it was just kind of one of those things where I just had to see for myself. And while not the healthiest attitude, that experience was necessary for me to learn as much as I did there.
You know, one thing I've always found fascinating is inanimate objects that all of a sudden are animated, such as Annabelle. And then I started to read about the origins of the movie Child's Play with Chucky, which was based on Robert the Doll, a doll from around 1906 in Key West. That's where it's housed now. it didn't harm people like Annabelle, but it would go from one window to another as people would go by. They didn't see it walking, but they knew that, say, one day it would be on the left window, and then the next day it would be on the right window. And that really got me on a roll to start digging in more to find out about haunted objects. So, what do you know about that? Any? Have you?
Well, that kind of movement, that sort of teleportation, that's an example of an apport or an asport. Those are things that seem to spontaneously appear or disappear. And sometimes things that disappear never reappear, and vice versa. So you hear it, although you hear it quite frequently that people misplace their keys or they misplace something and they're looking for it. They knew it was there and they kind of call out to the house or a spirit that they assume is in the house. They're like, okay, come on, stop fooling around with me. And then all of a sudden they find that object either where they thought it was or in another place. So I've never seen anything physically move, but I've seen something that has moved, meaning like, all right, just like Robert the Doll, I never saw anything get up off of its shelf, walk down the hall, and then place itself somewhere else. But um, I've definitely been present for things that have moved inexplicably.
Have you seen Annabelle? Because you're on the East Coast, and I do know that the Warren's Museum is in Connecticut. What state
Yes,
are you in, by the way?
I'm in New York, but
Okay,
I'm
close.
I'm a stone's throw from Connecticut, and despite that, I have never seen Annabelle. I mean, I've spent a lot of time in John Zaffis's Museum of the Paranormal, but the notoriety and celebrity of Annabelle herself, I never cared to go look. I think part of it was, all right, if she is as dangerous as is reported, she's in a glass case that says, do not touch, do not open. I'm fine with that. I'm content to let her
Yeah,
stay in her
yeah, me
case.
too. Me too. I don't
You do
want to
you,
handle
I'll
it.
do me.
I don't want to handle it. That's for darn sure. And you know what? It's fine where it is, where it's on the other side of the U.S. and I could just see pictures on the internet.
Not to mention, okay, like who took care of that case? Ed and Lorraine Warren. I trust that. All right, if you guys say it's haunted and don't touch it, uh, what am I going to contradict and say? Oh no, I want to investigate it. No, I'm fine to leave it in the case. Those guys were people who came before us and know more than I do. So who am I to say no? We got to break her out and do more research. And of course, we all do. We all are curious and want to know more, want to experience it, but. No one ever stands on a street corner, watches someone else get hit by a car, and say, "Man, I wish that happened to me."
I
No,
know, knock on wood, right?
yeah,
Let me ask you this. I've noticed in the last 20 years, not only has there been a huge acceptance with extraterrestrials and ghosts, and a huge resurgence in television shows, such the two that you were part of, Ghost Nation, which is basically a reboot of Ghost Hunters, and then there was Ghost Adventures. Far more money has been put into educating the public, into funding hunts than there was, say, in the 90s and the 100 years before. What do you think caused that monumental shift?
I really think that um, when the original Ghost Hunters came out in 2004, it tapped into this new thing called reality television, where quote unquote real people were seen doing quote unquote real things, and whether it's a cooking show or a contest show or any kind of show, like this was programming that was now looking into people's lives. And anytime we look at our culture or our society, our beliefs come along with it. So when I was a kid, I used to watch In Search of with Leonard Nimoy, and I was fascinated. That show really planted the seeds in me to want to do this. But now that we have reality television, what makes it easy and what makes it so approachable? It's cheap to produce. There's probably three people in the paranormal that get paid bank. The rest of us, it puts gas in our car, maybe buys us some groceries. Like, don't be fooled. You see us on TV, it does not mean we're rich. And this is true with most of reality television, most of the people involved are just so happy either to get on TV, depending on the format, or specifically with the paranormal, hey, this is great because I now get to get the word out, and it gets the word out to a wide audience. Sure, it's not about the money, it's about the message.
Now, there's a lot of people that are listening to this and who see you on the shows that you were on and are still on and want to, at some point in their lives, be ghost hunters. They want to do what you do. What do you say to those people? Is there anything they could do now to start preparing them for maybe a career in being a paranormal investigator?
A career? It's a career in the paranormal is like being an artist. You will starve.
That's
So
true.
be
I mean,
ready.
don't get me wrong. This here, what I'm doing, I am starving too, but it's what I like.
Exactly. Well, for 11 years, I worked in advertising, and I got paid decent money, good money, but I wasn't happy. The late nights and the weekends that I worked maybe got some more ads out so that a gigantic company could make more money and they could take their private jets and fly to Aruba. I wasn't helping anybody. All right. When I left that business and really focused on the paranormal and really was doing it more, I guess, full time, or just putting it at the forefront, sure, I was poor as a pauper, and ramen noodles are a staple of my diet, but I feel like I'm making a difference, and I feel like I'm helping people, and that nourishes your soul. That means something, and getting to talk to people, hearing their stories, helping whoever I can. To borrow the supernatural tagline, hunting things and helping people. It feels good. So people who want to do this, it's possible. You can do this. Don't think of it as a career, but think of it as a calling. What you're going to want to do is read, research, get mentored, go to paranormal events, dip your toe into things of that nature. Maybe shadow a local group, find out what they're about, go on some of their hunts, maybe join a group. But the most important thing that you will need is patience. Unlike the shows, things don't happen before the first commercial break. This is something that if you want to do it, it takes, you got to put your time in. No other profession, no other vocation happens instantly. You want to be a doctor, you got to go with schooling. You want to be a lawyer, plenty of schooling involved.
I know that. That's where my JD is. That's why I'm Dr. J. And that I'm not practicing law because just like you, when you were working in advertising, I hated it. I hated it with a passion. Sure, you could say some people were being helped, but as far as my soul, it was being destroyed. Here, I'm finally able to quench that thirst of curiosity I have. And, like you said, ramen is definitely a staple
Hell
of my
yeah.
diet, right? But I'm doing what I enjoy, and I'm far more happier. And that's a huge thing. Now, let me ask you about something specific. The Kinect camera, I've heard, and uh, there's only one video that sticks out in my mind, but I've heard that it's being used more and more now in ghost hunts. The video that I'm referring to is there was this antique store, and the owner said that a couch that was brought in was supposedly haunted. So they brought in a paranormal group. I don't know who it was that was investigating. They set up a Kinect camera, and they found that this ghost was responding to music by dancing. And then at one point, a lady stuck out her hand and held the ghost's hand, and you could see because the way the Kinect camera works is it looks for, I guess, very subtle movements, and it paints like a stick figure, and the ghost extended its hand, and it almost looked like they were holding hands, like a handshake. Do you know that video I'm
Oh
talking
yeah.
about?
Not the video, but I'm aware of the camera, and I've seen it used, and I've used it myself. Yeah, it's been around for the past 5, 6, 7 years in some form or another. And, I am skeptical of pretty much any device when it first drops, and I'm still skeptical. I mean, I see different mods of it and different versions of it. People are tinkering around with it and playing with it, and I think that's a great thing. I love to see the sandbox being played with. The issue I have with the Kinect or the SLS, whatever brand you particularly have, it was designed to act as a controller for your Xbox or for your video game system. So what it's trying to do, it's trying to map out a human form so that it can then give commands to the game in whatever parameters it has. Okay, so people are now using it to investigate the paranormal, and someone says, "Oh, look, it's dancing," or "Look, it's holding my hand," or "Oh, it's sitting on my shoulder," or "Oh, look, there he is." My problem is that who is to say that a spirit manifests anthropomorphically? Who's to say that a ball of energy need to have a torso, 2 arms, 2 legs, and a head?
That's right.
The device is a machine. It does not care what we want out of it. It's not trying to prove or disprove anything. It's just trying to follow its directives and map out the human form. So the minute it identifies something, it goes, okay, all right, I'm detecting something. All right, there's the stick. The stick in the middle, it then knows that this form must have 2 arms in that particular space. So it's going to try to find and extrapolate those pieces. And if it finds sufficient information to do that, it now builds that form. I think it's very narrow-minded of us to assume that a spirit will appear in that form. Although, again, I can't say definitively that they wouldn't. But yeah, I feel like it's just a self-fulfilling prophecy that we're designing what we want to find. And I would rather, and here's something I always tell people, it's all a matter of perspective. If you heard, like, okay, you're using the Kinect camera, and it maps out a stick figure. You can't say it's a ghost. You can't say it's grandma. You can't say it's a demon. You can't say it's an alien. You could just say it's something. All right, we detected something. That is the only truth of most of the evidence that we find, because there's no picture I can show you. There's no video I could play for you that can convince someone who is unwilling. We just have to go with the facts. And sometimes those facts are gray. They have no color or form. We just have to say, okay, I heard a sound. We heard a noise. What was it? So many people, this is a pet peeve of mine at public events. We'll do an EVP session. We'll play it back, and sometimes we'll hear a noise or hear a voice, and someone goes, "Oh, that's a woman. That's definitely a woman." I'm thinking, well, how do you know this? Did you check? Did it flash its ID card? Does this spirit identify as feel like we have so many qualifiers, but there's no need to jump to that conclusion, regardless of whether it sounds female or not. We don't have the information to say otherwise is premature.
There's 2 more questions in the chat for you before I get to the one that I was going to bring. Okay, Lasha Senyak asks, what about the spirit box? What does Brian think of those? Real or not?
Yes, I think the spirit boxes are good tools. And again, when I first discovered them, I was very skeptical. And it's good to have a healthy amount of skepticism with anything that you encounter or use. Now, what I always tell people, if you're going to use such devices, be it a spirit box, a shack hack, any variation of spirit box, or say an Ovilus or the iOvilus or any of those phone apps that can give you seemingly random words that get spit out. Now, keep in mind, human beings are storytellers. You give me 5 words, I will make those words make sense to the location I'm in, because that's just what we do. We can string along those variables and make order out of it. So when you turn on the spirit boxes specifically work by scanning the radio waves. So of course you're going to get radio broadcasts coming through, and the seasoned investigator will be listening for the voices above or below the scan, something that seems to be riding on top of the waveform. But it's very easy to get fooled by those radio broadcasts. And it's just think of the questions we ask. What's your name? How many are with us? Where are you? You get a radio broadcast just at the right timing. It goes, oh, hi, I'm Bob Jones, 104.3 Baltimore, and here's some more Led Zeppelin. All those bits of information like names and numbers are constantly broadcast, so we can't necessarily trust them. So what I do to combat that, I always use a password. And it's a simple thing to do. It doesn't cost a dime. You don't have to buy anything. If you're about to do a session, you just say, okay, tonight's password is octopus. And you make it different every time. Try to make it quirky, not too common, so that if something is coming through, you don't just want to assume, okay, I'm speaking to a spirit. If you give the password and the password is repeated, okay, that could potentially mean that something intelligent is listening, understood you, and then is following the requests to repeat that password. And if you get that password, everything that comes after it, you can have a little more confidence that, okay, maybe it is a spirit, because otherwise you're just stringing along variables and hoping for an outcome.
This next question, this person came in a little late, but I did sort of ask you this, but it's more of an expansion on it. So let me go ahead and ask it anyway. This is from Russell Grant. Can you please have your guest describe the methodology behind his instruments and studies?
That's behind my instruments and studies. That's it's kind of a very general, broad question.
Well, we went through the instruments: Ouija board, pendulum, the EMF reader, and the digital audio recorder, right?
Mm-hmm.
As far as methodology, I don't know. You mentioned password. That's a great idea, actually.
Yeah, well, it's as far as methodology goes, it's something that evolves. The Brian of 2002, of 2007, of 2012, and even of today. I've evolved, I've learned, I've done things differently. And like I said earlier in the broadcast, thinking as a scientist, when I get new information, if it contradicts the old information I had, and if it's credible, I don't just blindly hang on to that old information and go, no, I refuse. I'll have to alter my methodology. So a lot of the things that I do and a lot of the things that, especially like with passwords, these are things that I've gleaned over many years of investigating. And you need that solid foundation. Like I said, read, research. Then once you get into the field, it's about repetition. Doing things as close as you can, the exact same way every time, so that at least you can start gathering data and are able to compare it with each other from one location to the next. Because if you just do it haphazardly, it just becomes a collection of anecdotes and not actual research data. But then you have to go beyond that. Like I said, scientists are dreamers, so you have to experiment. You have to try new things, and whether that's a new piece of equipment, maybe working with a psychic, or a different methodology, say the Singapore experiment or the Gensfield experiments, or something that I've been working on with the psychic projection experiments. You try new things, and if they work, if they get results repeatedly, that becomes then part of your repetition. It becomes part of your arsenal of either tools or methods, and you just keep doing that. And then you experiment with something else, and if it doesn't work, you throw it out, but at least you tried it.
That's what experimentation is. That's what science is. You have to keep trying and test to see what works. What doesn't work, you throw out. What does work, you keep and you add to your arsenal.
It's tough because, even though we speak words like science and experiment and methodology, the paranormal is still very much under the flag of pseudoscience, and the rest of the scientific community looks askew at us. And I love public figures like Brian Greene and Neil deGrasse Tyson, and I've tweeted at both of them a couple times, and they're just like, "Yep, ghosts don't exist. Okay, next." And take someone like Dr. Mishu Kaku, and he's got a book called Parallel Worlds. He goes into lots of theories that we could and should be looking into as far as the paranormal. Like maybe this can help get us closer. And I don't think it necessarily needs to be a competition of yes, this exists and no, this doesn't. I guess the advanced dreamers of the scientific scene. Like, yeah, we're dreaming far out, but this has been part of our culture since the caveman days. So I feel like there's got to be something to it.
I think so, and especially if you have all these networks that are putting a lot of money into funding these, and even the non-TV shows, there are a lot of groups, a lot of even professors, parapsychologists who have done experiments to show that life sometimes passes on and stays here, an echo of that life. Real quick, let me ask you here the next two questions I have for you.
Sure.
We have, does a ghost retain sex after death?
The way we understand it currently, and this depends greatly on what stage they're at, and by that I mean, okay, is this one of the aforementioned trapped spirits who are still here, who haven't crossed over to the next plane? If so, they would probably retain that which they were in life, their self-image, almost like the Matrix, in the movie where they show up on that loading screen and he goes, whoa, I've got hair and I'm wearing a jacket, because that's how he sees himself, that's how he remembers himself, and that can often be true when it comes to spirits that haven't crossed over. That being said, all right, for those who have and choose to come back for visitations, for other reasons, they could really appear any way they want, because it's just energy. So when it comes to gender, and actually, here's a good movie. I mean, if we're going to anchor it, if we're going to use something popular culture to help illustrate this point, a good movie to watch is What Dreams May Come with Robin Williams. It's a heavy movie. It's a depressing movie. Don't watch it on a sunny day, or if you don't want to cry. But it seems to be the best representation of how we understand the afterlife at this point. And this is not necessarily a spoiler, but the characters encounter people who look very different than they did in life, because they have different images of themselves presently. And then if you take into account, if we're to believe in reincarnation and multiple lives, all right, once you shed off this life, who knows, maybe you might default back to a life that you felt more at home in, or something that hasn't quite happened yet. Because time, as we understand it, is no longer linear. There's some who theorize that it's all happening simultaneously, and I've been mentally wrestling with that as I've been moving forward in my paranormal research.
Here's another one from Lasha Senyak. Has Brian ever felt that a ghost or a spirit has attached itself to him or followed him home?
That's a good question. I get asked that a lot, and my answers were different depending on when you asked me them. Like back in the early days, I would say that coming home from those abandoned places and coming home from those early investigations, when I would come home, my house is my safe zone. It's my fortress of solitude. I don't do any practicing here. I don't do any kind of paranormal work here other than emails and Twitter. So I feel like if something did follow me home, I'd be ignoring it. So I'm watching TV, I'm watching a comedy, I'm watching some stand-up or South Park or a movie, and if they're trying to get my attention, they're going to have a hard time doing it and eventually give up and leave. Because for the most part, it seems like spirit just wants to get their story told or get a message across, and if I'm just the wrong person, or if I'm ignoring it, or I'm not the right person, there's no point to stay. That being said, as I've gotten older and I've gotten more seasoned, I feel like, yeah, you do have to take precaution to make sure that something doesn't follow you home, because not everything that can is happy to just leave if you ignore it. Sometimes you can ignore it and it won't go away. And that's when we encounter hauntings that are considered problems, or negative hauntings, or demonic hauntings.
Wow, these questions are piling up. People are absolutely interested in you.
Bring it on.
Okay, Russell Grant asks, could ghosts be projections of consciousness? Also, South Park is legit genius.
Love it. Yes, that's. I'm so glad you said that. I have a theory, and allow me to blow your mind for a moment. Okay, more often than not, the people who report paranormal activity are not paranormal investigators. They're your average, everyday people who are just going about their lives, trying to get things done, and then, oh, something happens, or they notice a shadow out of the corner of their eye, or they hear a sound. And these are not people sitting in their basement in the dark with a K2 meter. These are housewives or people who are working from home or commuting, and maybe you're washing dishes or maybe you're folding laundry, and out of the corner of your eye you do see something. You turn and it's gone. Okay, well, again, human beings, we are creatures of habit. We have our routines. We like to settle into routines. We tend to do the same things every day. You get up, you brush your teeth, you shower, you have a certain ritual that starts your day. You take probably the same route to work.
And also the same routine at the end of the day too. So it's
Yeah,
not it's the beginning, during the day, and the end of the day.
exactly. It keeps us on track. It's kind of just what we do. It's what we do. And everything in our universe is vibration and energy and vibration. So we're constantly expending energy, both in heat. Little pieces of ourselves are constantly coming out, like the skin particles and little bits of DNA, and our hair follicles are coming out and being left behind. We are figuratively rubbing a groove into the fabric of our own personal reality, just making a track. Now, like I said, who's to say that that shadow you see out of the corner of your eye has to be a spirit, has to be a ghost? What if it's you? What if you are creating a residual haunting of yourself in your space?
Wow.
Maybe because you're going through some stress, a hard time, and that extra energy is just making it manifest, bringing it to life, so to speak, enough that you can observe it. Because it doesn't happen to everyone, but it happens to enough people that, all right, if you can't interact with it, who's to say it's from the dead?
It's like you're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. Who's to say it? And with our limited vision, our limited spectrum, I can't even imagine what we already know cameras can catch things that our eyes can't see, but what about the fields of vision that cameras can't catch? If that's possible, if we had an opportunity to be able to see the full range of what's out there, I would think that all around us we are surrounded by different things, consciousness, energies. I just really think that would be the case. And you mentioned Michio Kaku earlier about the parallel universes or the different universes, different dimensions. There is far more evidence now that mathematicians are finding out that there are, I believe they said up to 11 dimensions, and others are saying that there are an infinite number of dimensions. 30 years ago, 50 years ago, this was pseudoscience. This
Yeah,
is finally becoming real science, and I am so happy that money is being poured into these ideas so people can explore them. Okay, here's more for you. What do you know about ghost pets? Animals, essentially.
there is a really good book out there. I can't remember the name. It's called Tales from the Other Side: Pets and the Paranormal, and it's a book that was put out by Myth Inc. Books, and it chronicles lots of different tales. It's an anthology of tales of people who have had encounters with departed pets, and I've even had one myself. And you think about spirit, and everyone just thinks, okay, it's got to be human, it's got to be people. But animals have souls, so why shouldn't their energy linger or be able to come back and visit as well? I totally believe in that. That's something that's almost a no-brainer to me.
Okay, this next one is not so much of a question, but since it's in capital letters, which everyone out there knows is for
They're
me
shouting.
to say. Yeah, no, it's for me to
Okay.
ask, to say. I'm going to read it to you. This has to do with what you were saying earlier about, throughout our daily routines and in possibly creating our own ghosts. So here it comes. That is what the Tibetans say. Ghosts are a manifestation of our own mind. What do you say about that?
I think this plays, and the reason I say this is that I've been applying this directly to an experiment I've been running for a little over a decade called the psychic projection experiment. And in it, I surmise that a portion, not all, but a portion of EVPs that we get, that we collect, are, once again, not coming from spirit. It's coming from us. It's coming from ourselves. Now, consider it, just for example, a cross-section of questions that are often asked during an EVP session. Questions like, what year is it? How many are with us? How old are you? Now, what these questions have in common is that they require numerical answers. So when you ask such a question, unconsciously, you're going to be expecting a numerical answer. And when you listen back to that recording, of course, you're going to be straining to hear it. So if you heard the person say, "Okay, how old are you?" and the voice goes, "Bill," you're going to try to take that word and force it to sound like a number, because that's what would make sense to you. A nonsensical answer, does not compute. So and then you take it to, how does spirit get their voices onto our recording media? Because, all right, the fact that if we were in a room together, you can hear me because I'm taking oxygen from my lungs, forcing up through the diaphragm, up my esophagus, past the teeth and tongue. That's going to create a vibration in the air. That vibration travels to your ear, which then translates it into a signal that's sent to a brain and translated again into language that you understand, or maybe you don't understand. That's a lot of steps. That's a lot of work for something as simple as communication. Now, spirit doesn't have a physical form that we're aware of, doesn't have that way to communicate like we do. So how are they doing this? The theory is that it's a psychic projection. They're psychically imprinting their thoughts onto the recording media. So if spirit can do it, why can't we? And for the past 12 or so years, I've been doing an experiment that directly tries to address this. And I'll have my subjects, I'll record for 60 seconds, and we'll pick a word. The word often has to be visceral. It has to mean something to the people. And for 60 seconds, we just do nothing but concentrate on that word. This is a perfect parapsychology experiment. Now, the concept is, okay, can we get our thoughts onto the recording media? This took me a long time to get to it, and I've modified it once or twice in the go of it. But in the past 12 years, I've got it to work 24 times. One time as recent as 2 weeks ago. And the X factor seemed to be that the word needs to be visceral. The people involved in the experiment, it has to mean something to them. It either has to be something funny or something that's really they can get behind. In addition to that, I feel the presence of active psychics, or people who are adept at that sense, have to help focus that energy. And yes, I guess rounding back to the point of the question was that, yeah, I do feel, especially when you bring up the Tibetan philosophy, so much of it is coming from us. But then again, at the same time, spirit is us too, yes? So, I mean, I guess round and round it goes. Which came first, chicken or egg?
Yeah, right. Here's another one for you from Russell. What is your guest's top recommended book to read? Best book read lately?
I'm currently in the middle of Mishukaku's Parallel Worlds. It's fascinating. It's even though it's not a paranormal book, it is about. He goes into the Big Bang, how our universe was created. He goes into how things were perceived. Like, things started with Newton and a static universe where values of certain things were uniform, universe-wide. And then along comes Einstein and says, no, it's variable, things change. this kind of thinking we can take and apply it to the paranormal, and should, especially of how we think and how we um, uh, look at the paranormal, because it really is all perspective. The thing that makes it difficult is that it's not repeatable in the laboratory sense, and that's what makes it difficult to quote unquote prove. Now, again, like I said, if we were on an investigation and something happened, we heard a sound, people could ascribe an identity to it, but the truth of it is we heard a sound. When it comes to the paranormal, what formula could I ever write? What string of ones and zeros can I ever jot down to equate you? And how many of those ones and zeros would I have to alter to then have that equate me? It's mind-boggling. But this book is forcing me to think in those ways. And believe me, there's lots of chapters and passages that are beyond me that I just don't understand. And I read over and over and over. And they're clearly getting into the formulaic lingo that is, a lot of times I like to read on planes. That'll knock me out. That'll put me right to sleep. But then when I wake up, I say, okay, I'm gonna get through this. I've got to get a grasp on this somehow. And that's great. This is how we'll stretch and expand and hopefully get everybody on board with thinking differently.
Real quick, let me throw a shout out to Justin T for the super chat. Thank you so much, Justin T and the Blue Crew. Brian, back to you. Since you're reading Michio Kaku's book, and I've been communicating with him to try to nail him down for an interview, I think it'd be really cool when I get him to bring you back to, pick his brain with what you know and have experience over the last 20 years.
That would be amazing. I'd be terrified that he'd make fun of me, and then I would be sad for a week.
Nah. He'd be respectful. I mean, he's done shows like this, absolutely. Yeah, I booked him for Art Bell when I was working with Art Bell. So,
I as I said before, like I'm on Twitter a lot, and one day William Shatner tweeted at me, and he goes, "I know who you are. You're the guy who goes and gets haunted objects." And my first reaction was not, "Oh no, that's not me. That's the old man. Johnny does that." My first reaction was, "Oh my God, Captain Kirk knows who I am."
Yeah. He's huge, as you know, huge into ETs, UFOs, paranormal, everything. He's one fantastic guy that I'd like to talk to at some point. As a matter of fact, in the mid '90s, he hosted a 2 hour one-off show called UFOs Above and Beyond. It was like the introduction to UFOs for people who really didn't know much. And considering we have such better technology now than we did 25 years ago to 4K cameras, 1080 this, and back then you were filming in VHS. It basically contained the best VHS camera shots you can get, or store surveillance cameras you can get. But yes, UFOs Above and Beyond, hosted by William Shatner, was one of the game changers for me. Even though I'd already been deep into that, I still will always remember that. All right.
See, I get the feeling that even though he hosts those shows, I don't think he's a big believer in the paranormal, because after that initial exchange, I went back and forth with him, and again, I was fanboying hard because, again, I grew up with Star Trek, so this is a part of my fanboy DNA, my geek DNA. He made fun of me a few times, in that Shatner-esque curmudgeonly way, and of course, I took it good-naturedly, but I'm thinking like, oh, Captain Kirk's making fun of me, but okay, I'll take it. At least he's talking to me.
I don't know about the paranormal, but as far as UFOs, just that topic, he definitely is a big fan of that. That I do know. But you're right. We could only speculate how much he really is, as opposed to as being hired to host these shows. Okay, here's another one for you. This is for Mr. Grant. Are there instances of ghosts traveling in water or underwater?
Yes, there are instances. There have been reports. I think, again, because we don't necessarily understand what they're comprised of and how they interact with our physical universe. Just the fact that they can walk through walls, walk through floors, it doesn't seem like they are bound by the boundaries and dimensions that we are. To say that they can go through water, it definitely makes sense. Although at the same time, we have noticed that water can be an ionizing agent for certain things. And it seems like, okay, like after a thunderstorm, the energy is charged with ions. Sometimes people report that they get better communication on their EVP sessions or their spirit boxes. Even if you boil it down to something simplistic and go to just hearsay, the Legend of Sleepy Hollow. Okay, Ichabod Crane was chased by this spectral figure who could not cross running water. And sometimes we've seen instances that, running water does make it difficult. Like, John Zathis, sometimes when he wants to cleanse an object that has energy attached to it, he'll throw it in running water because that water will then break it up, literally wash it away over time. So I can't tell you facts or figures about it, just what we've been sort of observing.
Do you have an idea why there are some spirits that end up lingering and end up at some point crossing over, as opposed to others who are here for decades, if not centuries, sometimes even millennia?
To be a paranormal investigator requires a multitude of disciplines. It's not just the gadgets and gear and the ghost talk. A lot of it comes down to psychology, sociology, theology, all the ologies rolled up into one, because to say that ghosts do this is reductive. And, you can't, just like for people, you can't say, well, all people do this other than, breathe oxygen and reproduce, et cetera, et cetera. Any of the ists are like, all right, well, all this type of person does this would be either racist or ageist or something of that thing. So it's the same with spirit. It's very difficult to say, well, they all do this. It comes down to, like for some of them that may be trapped, like we were discussing before, sometimes it's a fear of judgment. Sometimes it's they don't know they're dead, so they have no reason to move on. Maybe they have unfinished business, be it something good or something ill. Maybe they want to get revenge. Maybe they want to tell a loved one that they love them one more time. The reasons are as varied as the differences between individuals. It's difficult to say. So each case is unique.
What do you know about ley lines? A lot of people say that there are ley lines that have more energy that's either coming from the earth and causing certain anomalies. Other people point to the 37th parallel as being having more UFO activity and maybe even more cattle mutilations. Why do you think some places on Earth have more activity than others?
I think that, yes, there are locations that do display more activity than others, but I don't think we've been able to hammer down why. And things like ley lines and vortexes seem to be the popular culprits. But honestly, when it comes to ley lines, there's been no proof that's substantial enough to say that, yes, these are things that can enhance haunting or focus energy. In a pseudoscience, this is a doubling down of pseudoscience on top of it. And I've looked into that, and it seems to be an arrangement of beliefs, almost like saying that voodoo is not necessarily a religion as far as say the voodoo doll. People say that, you can create a voodoo doll and the intended target will suffer the effects of whatever is happening to it. It's not necessarily a religion. It's not necessarily a process, but an arrangement of beliefs that may or may not work. When we try to explain the origins of the paranormal, again, man, like nature, abhors a vacuum or an explanation. and we try to give explanations. It's like, oh yes, it's Mercury's in retrograde, so everyone's going nuts, and oh, it's a full moon tonight, and oh, there's an Indian burial ground nearby, so that's going to cause, we really don't know, but we're grasping, we're crawling in the dark, trying to get these answers and try to make them stick and try to make those observations that bear out over time. And ley lines are still in the running, but I've yet to see any research that really makes it a contender.
Grasping is 110% correct, Brian, because we are always trying to fit something in the patterns that we were raised. I mean, the schooling that we've all had is very linear, and so when we get out in the real world and we're dealing with something supernatural, we try to fit it in patterns, even though they defy all laws of physics. And who's to say they are going to fall in these patterns when they are already defying laws of physics?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, and those laws are only laws until another law comes and breaks it and says, okay, well, no, this is the new truth.
Frankie Zomboy, what are some alien conspiracies going on currently?
I could tell you, but then I'd have to kill you. Well, my favorite one of mine, and especially because I'm paranormal caught on camera, I have to comment on a lot of UFO videos. And there was one I remember. It was this pyramid UFO that was seen hovering over the Pentagon, and you get a lot of them coming out of Russia, and it's like, who's hiding what, and what contact has been made, and what about Roswell, and all that. The one that I feel rings true, although I don't know, and I forget what, I don't know if it's Real Time with Bill Maher or the Daily Show, but they have a segment that says, I don't have any proof, but I know it's true. This would be my I have no proof, but I know it's true. That I feel over the years, we've been leaked all this information in pop culture, in movies about UFOs and aliens and their structure and what they look like and what their craft look like, so that who knows in the days to come when they do acknowledge them and say, yes, they are real, yes, we've been in contact with them, we're working with them, what have you, it won't be such a mind stretch to comprehend. It won't be something totally foreign, because it'll be like, oh yeah, it's just like V, or oh, it's just like Battlestar Galactica, or oh, yeah, I get it, I understand it, I know what that's like. And I mean, it seems like a clever ploy. Like, yeah, if they're going to introduce themselves, they're not just going to land a ship, pop the door and say, hi, we're here, because they'll get
shot.
They'll get shot. Yeah. They've been observing our culture. They know we're unhinged.
Oh, that's right. We're very violent. Let me say one thing about this. Tom DeLonge left Blink-182 to pursue UFOs, and he started to the Stars Academy. I was watching One American News Network, which is a very conservative cable TV network, like CNN, but they're more to the right. And I was surprised that the headline story was Tom DeLonge announcing that he had obtained a biological sample. He's not going to say what it is. He's having it tested, but he says without a doubt it is extraterrestrial, and I'm assuming when the season premiere or the next season of his television show, I forgot what it's called. The last one was only 6 episodes this past summer, but it's been renewed for another year with Lou Elzinato and other figures from formerly in intelligence and Navy and Italian Air Force and so on and so forth. I'm assuming he might even save it for the finale. But for him to go on to make the rounds, because I only saw it on One American News, but it turns out he literally made the rounds on CNN, on Fox, and everything. And he said that. That's a pretty bold statement to say you have a biological sample. You know, that's like saying you have an ET dead in your closet somewhere, you know?
Oh, absolutely. And unfortunately, in our culture these days, with the advent of social media and the internet and instant access to information and an overload of clickbait and things vying for your attention, we live in a different world than we did 50 years ago, where in that a member of a rock band can say, "Hey, I've got this stuff and I'm going to prove it." I mean, just me hearing it, I'm like, "Oh, of course you do." I'm skeptical, and I'm in this field. I want to know. I think it's largely used for us to disbelieve it. It's that's the control. That's the we don't have to cover the story because no one's going to believe it anyway. And who knows? I mean, if it's 100% on the money, that would be amazing. But the fact that there's a show involved with it could be ratings.
Show,
it could be
a movie, and a book, and all that. Yeah.
We're going back to Al Capone's vault, and you open up the vault, and there's nothing, and we watch for 2 hours for nothing.
Well, and the thing is extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. So, in order for him to say something like that, he really must be confident that what he has, I'm assuming he had some preliminary testing to make sure it wasn't, say, a cat or a dog or something
Yeah.
weird, right? I would think that would have happened before he made these rounds. Because
well, here's the example that, like I said before, with the introduction of pop culture, my mind immediately goes to the movie Evolution with David Duchovny and Orlando Jones, where a meteorite strikes down in Arizona, and it has on it extraterrestrial microbes that were frozen in space, that when it collided with Earth's atmosphere, the heat caused them to start multiplying and evolving and coming to life, back as if it was on their planet. Yes, this is extraterrestrial life. It could be microbial. Yeah, maybe he did. I mean, to say that, oh, hey, I found evidence of alien life doesn't necessarily mean green men in spacesuits.
Right.
It could be,
bacterial.
Right? Yeah, some kind of proof that, yes, outside of our planet, life does exist. So that could be completely 100% true.
Piggybacking off the UFO question, Nine Lives would like to know, has Brian ever seen a UFO?
I've seen things that I can't identify, but because I don't work in air traffic control, I'm ignorant of many of the things that are above my head. That being said, I guess to answer the question, I don't think I've ever seen anything that I feel was an extraterrestrial. But who knows? I mean, these days, especially since I've been on Paranormal Caught on Camera, I find myself looking up a lot more.
And I would think, because you are have been on one show and are on another, I would think more people are bringing you videos and saying, "Hey, what do you think of this?"
Oh, absolutely. I mean, you cannot be in the paranormal and go to paranormal events and conventions without half the people taking out their phones and go, "Hey, Brian, I want you to take a look at this." And hey, that's great. I mean, that's the whole premise of Paranormal Caught on Camera. Just the average person saying, "Hey, I experienced something. What do you think it is?"
Now, let's see what I got here. Well, we got about 15 minutes left maximum, so I want to ask you, what didn't we cover? I know there's a lot more to you and your shows and what you do that you want to tell us, because a lot of it's been taken up with questions that people wanted to ask you, which I love. I love interactive shows, and I hope you do too.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it's one thing for you and I to have a conversation, but I definitely would want to talk about what the people want to hear, and that's I love getting all those questions. So thank you, everyone. And it's tough because, like, when I go to events, and sometimes we'll have the public hunts, and each section might be 45 minutes, or if I have a lecture on stage, I might get an hour. I have 17 years worth of experience that I want to get to them, that I just don't have the time to fit it all in. So I find myself forgetting things and going, oh, I wanted to talk about this, but we're running out of time. And so, I mean, just to keep up with me and what I'm doing, I'm very easy to contact in social media. So I have my website, neverstopsearching.com. I also have a Patreon page, patreon.com/Brian J. Cano. If you just want to send me something in 280 characters, you can find me on Twitter, @Brian J. Cano. And I feel like people who are curious about the paranormal definitely start coming to the events, start supporting your local events, or hop on a plane and come to some of the stuff out on the East Coast, because it's one thing for us to show up and lecture and say, hey, here's what we think. We've been on the show, so we've experienced a lot. Every event I go to, I find myself learning from the people who show up, because this is really a collective thing that we're doing. And even though there's a lot of teams out there, they've got their black shirts and their acronyms of whatever state they're in and whatever their name is. This is not like football or baseball. It's not teams
It's not
that were in competition
competition.
with each other.
You guys are working together.
Well, that's the thing. We should be one team. We're all on the same team. We're all looking for the same thing. So let's try to collaborate more. Let's not worry about, this is my location and this is my evidence. Look, everything that we throw into the pot helps us all advance. And that's what I like to do on these shows and at conventions. If I can, I've made plenty of mistakes. So if I can help new groups and new investigators skip over some of that stuff that doesn't matter and get them further down the road, then we all can move forward together that much faster.
Yeah, collectively. And I'm assuming, some of the other people that I've had on this show, Grant Wilson, Jeff Bellinger, Jason Hawes is coming on soon. I'm sure at some point you've interacted with them and exchanged ideas, right?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I'm friends with all those guys. And when I'm not kind of poking fun at Jeff for looking like Jim Carrey, the man is fascinating.
Yeah.
Like, if you get a chance to sit in on one of Jeff's lectures, it's always amazing. Do it. Don't even hesitate.
Well, we were lucky to have him yesterday, so that was awesome. And Jason Hawes on his own show, Beyond Reality Radio, I was his guest a little over 2 years ago, no, a year and a half ago. And so he's coming on soon, along with, I believe it's Dave Tango.
Oh, yeah. I'm good friends with Dave.
You know these guys. Yeah. Okay. Let's see what else I got for you here. Now, me being in Los Angeles, aside from the Queen Mary, where would you suggest I would go for a fantastic time where I might be scared out of my wits, but I might see something?
I would have said Linda Vista, but I don't think that's there anymore. I think that either got torn down or turned into something else. Scare. Well, see, that too is also a perspective. Like, something that might scare me might not scare you, and vice versa. So I feel like no matter where you go, be it a famous haunt or something that's been recently discovered, if you keep your mind open to the possibilities and yet a little skeptical to not be naive, that's a good way to approach the paranormal. So, I mean, this can happen in your studio tonight. And I mean, the more we do things, the more we pay attention to it. And I tell this to people on investigations all the time. The fact that we're actively investigating in this spot, we're sending a flag up the pole, figuratively to the other side or to the other realm, saying, all right, we're looking to talk. We're here to make contact. We're ready. So they'll find us. So you don't necessarily need to go to a quote-unquote haunted location, but doing so often gets you in the mood. So for people who haven't experienced it, they can go to a place and it sort of gets them ready for that contact.
Brian, this has been such an amazing conversation. A lot of great questions and a lot of great answers from you. And even the questions that I've had for you were asked. We could go 10 or more minutes, but I think it's a perfect place to stop. That's my opinion, unless you have any more to say.
Yeah, that feels good. We got to leave them wanting more. I can always come back some other time.
Let's do that. And before we go, give one final statement and then hang tight so I could thank you off air.
I just want to thank all the listeners for listening and the great questions. And I'll leave you with my tagline, which is never stop searching.
Amen to that. Brian Cano, everybody. And remember, keep your eyes in the sky, keep your mind open, and like he said, never stop searching. The truth is out there, and the more we are searching, the more we are collaborating, the closer we are going to get to the truth. I think the times that we are living in now are far better than they have been for these topics. because there is so many more open minds, and I think because of that, more people are sharing, and when more people are sharing, we are able to look at those cases and try to see if there are patterns, assuming there are any, because as we mentioned earlier, our minds always try to fit in patterns. With that being said, Brian and I are officially signing off.